Chapter 7. This is a broad topic as usual, so we're not going to be able to hit in great levels of details. There are entire levels of graduate school courses on this very subject alone. Information security is probably one of the most prominent parts because we see it on the news every day. We talked about the massive increases in business data and the sources of those data. And with all of this vast amounts, there are a myriad of security problems that accompany all the growth we've seen. So let's just start off by a couple of terms. The term security carries the notion that someone or something is working to do something illegal or harmful. Information security then carries the idea that the realm of business data and information are encompassed in this thing we're protecting. As with most forms of security, the primary concern here has to do with people, bad people doing bad things and good people doing harmful things. Anything that poses a threat to the authorized access and use of an organization's data should be covered by internal policies and processes designed to protect an organization's information and the information systems that carry it. We concern ourselves with the threat of a security breach because it makes sense to identify risks and move to mitigate the impacts of those risks. The threat of cyber and other forms of security breaches is real. Failure to protect against violations of our information systems costs billions of dollars a year and disrupts tens of thousands of businesses routinely, not to mention government agencies. The reason for studying information security is to understand the attack surface that represents our business systems and understands our vulnerabilities in light of current forms of attack. The slides that follow will address a few key factors that increase our vulnerability security attack, and will focus on cybersecurity specifically as it's associated with our access to the internet. Now, the text discusses 5 key factors about vulnerability. There are many factors that conspire today to make today's networks rich a target area. As technologies increase in power and provide access to internet, the possible attacks increase dramatically. Today, we're all comfortable with the power of our mobile devices. Cell phones and mobile computer devices are, by their nature, wide open to attack. The data we send and receive is broadcast into the air, and anyone with similar receiver-transmitter capability can intercept and compromise what we're doing. Computers are everywhere in every form. Just a few years ago, a Corvette had 72 distinct microprocessors on board the vehicles to monitor and control vehicle operations. We have nearly unlimited storage capacity in the cloud nowadays to store all of our personal and organizational data. We have lots of venues for creating and consuming information: social media, streaming video, Google Docs, more and more out there. Not only do we create and consume vast amounts of information, we store it in public places. While this is happening, the skills needed to hack our information systems is decreasing all the time. Armies of people are creating powerful hacking tools that are available to everyone to download. As you've seen in the news, the criminal use of the internet is exploding. Cybercrime is far more lucrative than old forms of crime. Organized crime and nation states are using the internet for nasty purposes that were just the purview of James Bond spy movies a few years ago. Personal information is easily compromised by the bad players, but we're also seeing a steep increase in various forms of security breaches that target businesses specifically. These businesses represent a large percentage of the wealth in our nation and other nations. It's increasingly important for companies to prepare to defend themselves from relentless attacks on their information systems. In most companies, managers hold the purse strings, and identifying and defending against security risks costs a significant amount of money. Without the support of managers in organizations, security efforts are often woefully underfunded, vulnerable to attack, and as we use all these sort of military terms describing this, metaphorically speaking, this is very much a state of war for information security out there. Now, the authors identify two general sources of threats to information security, unintentional and intentional. The unintended threats typically come from trusted people, employees, and vendors that take some action that inadvertently causes harm to themselves or the system. A large percentage of all security breaches are of this type. Inside threats, shown in this graph, are a mixed bag of different intents. Well, the unintended breaches are a very serious matter to be discussed by IT. The authors in this book focus mostly on external threats. They're more easily identified as intended sources of harm and malfeasance. Most of the focus of information security is focused on these external threats, as they are the more unpredictable and can be much more malevolent in nature. The takeaway from this slide should be that there are many possible ways for our information systems to be compromised. Human mistakes figure, the part of this that says human mistakes shows examples of the ways that human error of well-intended people can be the source of a system compromise. One point well taken in the text is that the higher ups, the position a person has, the more access that is given to sensitive information. Higher access to sensitive information comes with these roles and represents significant harm to the company should their negligence be exploited. For some reason, the authors put social engineering in the unintended threat area. There is a lot of literature out there that treats this type of threat as an attack on both an intended and malicious format. So be aware of that. This slide from the text shows a simple sampling of the type of things that well-meaning people can do to cause great harm in their working environments. Notice the use of the term careless. Company computer network policies likely cover these basic topics, but are often ignored unless there are penalties for carelessness. So social engineering. This topic, I really think, needs to get a new name given the political use of the term out there in the media. But as we use it here, the techniques of social engineering are a very low-tech way of defeating high-tech defenses. Why spend lots and lots of money and time trying to penetrate a fortified system when you can simply ask someone for the information? Without strict rules for what people can or cannot do, social networking has been and continues to be a very successful form of hacking. Next couple of slides provide a sample list of attack categories that have thousands of variations. As soon as one form of attack is discovered and mitigated, another takes place. Security officials are usually behind the curve when dealing with threats. They often don't know what can go wrong until it does. We're not going to go through this list completely item by item. We'll focus on a few. But notice that these types of attacks deal with information in transit or at rest. In all cases, the value of the information is greatly diminished when compromised in some way. Motivations for these acts range from thrill-seeking to activism to diminishing the competition to outright criminal behavior. In all of these cases, is the owner or controller of the information that is on the defense. In war scenarios, an aggressor has a different set of strategies than the defender. In security sciences, the posture is almost always in a defensive frame of mind. Now, notice that while the focus of recent news has been on cybersecurity, there are many other ways to compromise a system. Security experts often think of an information system as a set of attack surfaces which can be exploited. The idea here is that there are many types of attacks. Some attack weaknesses in software, some steal hardware, some focus on social weaknesses. All forms of organizational information have some value and are therefore a potential target. Unlike conventional warfare, the enemies are varied in their approaches. Rather than trying to understand the varied motivations of the attackers, security communities must focus on the security of the assets that need to be protected. Another consideration when identifying valuable information is the area of intellectual property. Companies often attain some competitive advantage based on company secrets. Intellectual property, or IP for short, is any private information that has been created or purchased by a company that is considered valuable and private. This can range from plans for a new product, strategic marketing documents. The information on these documents gets out past authorized eyes and results in harm to the company, and it can be great. In some cases, the information is known to the public, but is secured against use by others through patents and copyright protections. For organizations to grow and to achieve their internal goals, they must have protection from those who would see them fail. Often, intellectual property is just information. So in a sense, the security of that information is just the same. As you might guess, the value of all informational assets are not the same. Most costs and resources should be spent in protecting the most valuable information assets as determined by an organization. Now, we'll talk about three categories of the attacks from above in the previous slides. In the world of information systems, it is software that generates, stores, processes, and displays the vast majority of information. Now, hardware too is critical to the movement of the information, but it's essentially just the plumbing of the system. It is the software that works over the hardware which provides almost all the value of an organization. While the miracle of modern software is displayed everywhere around us, it also provides the majority of the security risks. Software is essentially designed by people and is subject to the narrow focus of their intent. There's a growing emphasis on creating security-aware software, but as we mentioned before, the number of attack vulnerabilities is almost endless, making it hard to keep up. Nobody can think of all the possible exploits of their software. As a starting place, the authors identify three categories of software attacks. While this might be a little simplistic, it's enough for a discussion. The first category is exploits the required users and requiring them to do something. We need to click on something or in some way launch a software process. This opens the door for malicious software elements to compromise our system in some way. And given that the system we have may be inside the corporate firewall or in a protected area, once my own machine gets compromised, further damage to the system can be much easier to accomplish because of most of the network security schemes are outward facing and not expecting trouble from within. And this is, if you work for companies or at the school, you will see occasionally emails warning you of some don't click on this phishing attack or email that seems legitimate but isn't. And these proactive warnings don't always get heeded, and that leads to compromises in systems. Next category of attacks requires no action from the user. An example is a denial of service attack. You also hear people use DOS. I don't like to use that acronym because it's too close to the old DOS system acronym. A website is designed to allow people from the internet to use it. This is the essential purpose of a website. A denial of service is accomplished when my server in my company is flooded with bogus requests in a very short period of time. This can overwhelm a system and often results in it crashing. You've probably seen some high-profile versions of this in the news. At the very least, it so inundates with bogus requests that it can't service real customers adequately. And the reading goes in about the variations of the DOS. The third category of software attacks has software programmers writing malicious code that's embedded in the program that we're using. Sometimes this comes with the software, and sometimes it's embedded as a result of something that we might have clicked on. Results of these embedded snippets of code can range from sending my private information to bad guys or just destroying the system. These are hard to spot and hard to mitigate. Instantly, we used to have a lot of Easter eggs put in programs like Excel and Word, things like that in the old days, that used to be cute things to find in other programs. Those became illegal after 9/11, and technically under federal law, it can get you a felony charge if you embed something into a software program that is not related to the strict purpose of creating that. So you can't embed Easter eggs in Excel anymore. If you find a really old version, it can be fun. So you read about this alien software, and I'll just mention that these invasive programs can be extremely annoying to the device user. These are nasty little programs that embed themselves in your computer and take control of something you're processing. At a minimum, they'll degrade your performance for your device, but they're often malicious in intent. Be aware that this category of software invasion needs special attention to prevent. Once it is in your computer, it may take IT professional intervention to clear it out. The takeaway from this slide is that while much of what we talk about is recommending measures at the corporate level, these malusers will attack your personal computing space, so be aware and protect yourself. Now step back for a second and consider the topic of risk for an organization. Risk here is defined as having potential harm to you or the organization. All projects and information systems represent risk to an organization. The key is identifying those risks before they occur. Easy to say. Of course, that is the point of our conversation about security. Identifying risks is difficult. Unless you have experienced the downside of risk, you may not have the knowledge to identify it. Studying security is mostly about understanding the nature of risk and how it applies to you and your organization. Once a risk has been identified, you need to assess the impact on the system or the organization. Some risks represent catastrophic damage to your system, while others are just annoying. But even annoyance takes time and money to deal with and diminishes your efficiency. You also need to consider the possibility of a risk that might occur, or what is the likelihood of it's going to occur. If risk has a small chance of occurring or is not significant, you may decide it's not worth tracking. You must decide at what level of impact and probability resources will be used to sort the risks into those that will be monitored and those that won't. Once you have selected a list of risks to track, you need to establish a measurable trigger, if you will, or something that will instigate an event to let you know when the risk has occurred. These triggers need to really have very specific and measurable ways to use them. Risk mitigation is then your plan for what to do if this risk event actually happens. Organizations need to have multi-layered response to any particular threat. This security is in depth and is far more effective than a single security measure. As mentioned, the purpose of studying information security is to identify risks and to craft controls necessary to stop the problem or recognize the problem when it occurs. Depending on the area of interest, there are many kinds of controls that we can put in place and will form the basic architecture of our security plan. In some cases, we just need to prevent physical access to sensitive areas. This would be locks, fences, video surveillance, and guards are typical elements of just physical security plans, refusing to let someone walk through a door. Next level of control is information systems, and to let authentication be required that the user is who they say they are, and then to check and see what resources that person is authorized to. One of us probably has a password to get to our Google account. Moving deeper into the system, we need to establish a broad set of communication protocols that regulate the flow of information across our networks of our enterprise. These sophisticated security tools need information technology expertise to design, install, and maintain. Given that our plans to secure our system might fail, we need a mitigation strategy, as mentioned before, for keeping our system alive and functioning. This plan is often called a business continuity plan, being the plan that will let you continue, or disaster recovery plan. Now, like any disaster recovery plan, these plans must be practiced and revised continually to stay abreast of the changing threat environment. As with any risk management plan, we need to audit the system and assure that it does what we think it should do. Ideally, system audits test the system before it fails. Some audits perform in-house to protect the company from catastrophic failures. Others, are generated from regulatory bodies to assure compliance to required standards. The healthcare industry is governed really heavily by, you hear the HIPAA. Smart designs are done by designers and build audit controls into the designs to facilitate audits of their systems. A lot of words there. Now, this graphic points out that regardless of how access is attempted, the goals are often to get into the corporate's LAN, or at least beyond the individual workstations where work, software, and information is located. Larger companies have many more layers of securities, while smaller companies or remote users may have fewer obstacles to access for the bad guys to overcome. Often, companies install dedicated firewalls, you hear that term a lot, at the point of entry to a network. This term, firewall, comes from basically the old building and construction trades, and it's a wall that helps prevent the spread of fire from one section of a building to another. The IT people borrowed this term to signify a device that filters out unwanted traffic that tries to enter from the outside. It's common that firewalls put up most of the security measures on the outward-facing interface to act as a secure sort of front door to the network. This graph shows two types of firewall protected systems. The first one, A, shows a typical home network that is connected to a local internet service provider. While the broadband modem may provide some firewall features, the home computer often has the sole firewall set up to protect the individual's computer. For example, Windows machines have built-in firewalls and in later versions of their operating systems. Now, figure B does this for a typical business network. The external firewall is connected to the internet service provider and provides the full level of traffic filtering. If the company has a website, it will be in a semi-secured area called a DMZ, borrowed from the demilitarized zone type of thing, which you might hear the old demilitarized zone between North and South Korea in the news. It's kind of analogous to that. And while we want public traffic to get to our web server, but we don't want them into our private LAN. So a second firewall then presents a more stringent traffic filter between the DMZ and the corporate LAN. Communication rules are established in these firewalls that evaluate which traffic can pass through and which cannot. Now, one of the key technologies that allows us to send private information over a public network like the internet is called encryption. Now, encryption takes the information that we want to send and converts it into a heavily coded version of the message. The encrypted data is scrambled, so it's very difficult to decode. There are various forms of encryption. Some encryption schemes are more secure than others. The more secure the encryption, the more overhead in the data and the greater processing cost encoding and decoding the messages. Remember us talking about how messages were sent around in earlier chapters through different channels. Now, the graphic shows a simple public key encryption scheme that allows two people to send and receive coded or encrypted messages. Each key in this graphic represents a computer algorithm that encodes the data going in one direction, and then another key decodes it on the receiving end. This technology allows us to use the very public internet to send private messages. There are tools called virtual private networks, or VPNs, that provide an encryption service between endpoints across the internet. Encrypting the data inside an unencrypted packet is called tunneling. This tool greatly extends the business uses for sending private data across the internet. Now, while public key encryption methods are handy and easy to use, businesses often need more robust and secure encryption services. In the public key system, it's not always easy to tell if you're communicating with the right person. One answer to this problem is the industrial strength digital certificate. This is a service provided by a trusted third party that guarantees the authenticity of the communicating pairs. As with all security technologies, the more you pay, the better potential service can be. Check out the graphics to see how digital certificates differ from public key encryption. So the reading this week was intended to give you an overview of a hugely complex topic. I'm hoping that you're able to get a sense of the enormity of the task in securing an information system. Much of the security work is out of the view of the users and management, so it doesn't always get the priority or the funds needed within an organization. It's one of the things that you don't notice it until it fails. As we found out, there's no such thing as a completely secure system. The totally secure information system would be one that really no one could ever use. The question is how much security risk an organization can afford to endure as it does business. Understanding the nature of the risks and the costs associated with the cures of that risk is the focus of information security.